Rotary, the Fairground Road intersection, Amelia Drive, Young's Way, Lovers Lane, the Gregland Ave and Goldfinch Drive intersection, then heading further east, the Macy Lane Airport Road intersection, Nobodea Farm Road, and then heading up the northern end of Nobodea Farm Road at Milestone Road. Basically a traffic study, as I'm sure you've heard plenty of times in presentations in the past, is generally comprised of three major components. The first is identifying existing traffic conditions within that study area. The second is identifying what the future conditions are going to be, both with and without this project. And the third is identifying what the impacts of the project are, basically a comparison between what we refer to as no build without the project versus a build condition with the project, and figure out what sort of improvements are necessary to accommodate that increase in traffic. Any development obviously is going to increase traffic on the roads. The question is by how much, where will that traffic go, what impact does it have, and what's the developer's responsibility to mitigate those impacts, really, what it comes down to. Next slide, please. So under existing conditions, the very first thing is collecting traffic count data. We've been working very closely with your planning staff over the last several years, actually now, and have collected count data both during the morning, the afternoon, and on a Saturday midday time period. In the morning, as you can see, from 8 to 11 in the morning, and the afternoon from 3 to 6 in the afternoon, and on Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Basically, in an effort to find out what are the peak hours of the day, which typically fall somewhere in that during those time periods. So those are the three time periods that we studied for this project, because while the residential component of this project generates most of its traffic during the weekday morning and afternoon rush hour, the retail component of this project generates more traffic on a Saturday. So that's why we studied all three time periods. All data was collected in July and August. Make sure that we collect peak summer month conditions, obviously. And then it's a matter of collecting geometric and traffic control information at each of these locations, doing an accident research at each intersection, which, by the way, showed that the most accidents that you've had in the last 3 years were at the Milestone Rotary and at the Fairgrounds Road intersection. No big surprise there, I'm sure. Although the number of accidents, when you compare it to the volume of traffic, is still quite substantially below the state average. Basically, it's calculated in an intersection accident rate, which is a rate, the number of accidents versus the volume of traffic. The higher the volume, the higher number of accidents you have. And when you compare locally what's happening with the state average, it gives you an indication of whether or not a problem exists. It's not to mean that there aren't problems at those intersections, but the number of accidents have been fairly limited, about 3 accidents per year at those 2 intersections, and then less than that at all of the other study locations. We've also collected vehicle speed data along Old South Road in the vicinity of where the driveways will be. The purpose for that information is to identify what the minimum sightline requirements are. The faster the speed of traffic, the more you have to be able to see down the road to see oncoming traffic and be able to make a decision whether or not to pull out onto Old South Road. That information showed us that 85th percentile speeds, basically 15% of the people exceed that speed, but 85% of the people stay within that speed or lower, is 40 miles per hour, obviously higher than the speed limit of 35 miles per hour, so we made sure we designed for 40 miles per hour, not the speed limit. And we do have, and it's documented pretty well in the traffic study, we actually did a sightline plan and profile that we can exceed actually the desirable sight distances. So we do believe that there will be plenty of available distance that you can see oncoming traffic to be able to make an informed decision on whether or not to pull out onto Old South Road. Next slide, please. The second step is projecting future traffic conditions, and for that we have a 7-year design horizon that's consistent with Mass DOT standards for traffic impact studies. Basically projecting traffic out to the year 2023, and we do that by through a number of different ways. One is what has been the general growth in traffic on the island over the last 10 years, and we've been working again with the planning staff on that and have determined that a 1% per year growth rate should be used. I found in going back through 10 years worth of count data on Old South Road that it's actually been less than that, more like around, I believe it was 0.6% on average. But we've used 1% sort of to present a conservative estimate of what future traffic will be. In addition to that, we've added in traffic from 6 other development projects that are either have been constructed now since the counts were conducted, like the Stop and Shop project, for example, as well as other developments that are either in the planning stages or are contemplated. Again, working with your planning staff on that, make sure we account for specific projects in that area that are going to add traffic to Old South Road on top of that annual growth rate. There's also several planned improvements in this general area. I'm sure you're all aware of it. The Milestone Rotary, you've had ongoing plans for upgrading that roundabout, that rotary, into a modern roundabout, as well as adding a roundabout at the Fairgrounds Road intersection with Old South Road. And then more recently, there's, I guess, a plan to study the overall Old South Road corridor for potential capacity improvements and multimodal access, transit use, pedestrian accommodations, bicycle accommodations, that sort of thing. Because all of these are still in flux and not exactly sure when these will happen, we did not account for any of these when we developed our future traffic projections. The traffic generation for this project, we have 100 single-family homes proposed, 225 apartments, and about 15,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space. To estimate how much traffic this project will generate, we use what's called the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They have issued a trip generation manual, which basically gives you traffic generation rates based on either square footage or number of units for a whole variety of different land uses, including the ones that are proposed here. And based on that information, we expect, and you can see the numbers behind you, but in total, about 210 trips in the morning rush hour, 293 total trips entering and exiting the site in the afternoon rush hour, and about 277 on a Saturday peak. So the PM peak hour clearly is the highest generator, and actually the PM peak hour is also when you have the highest volume of traffic on Old South Road. So that really becomes the critical time period for design of any improvements. Next slide, please. So now we need to distribute that traffic onto Old South Road and the various intersections. And based on where because it's two different essential components of the project, we have a residential component and a retail component, and each of these have different distribution patterns, if you will. The residential component, we expect the majority of traffic will be headed to the west of the site, basically towards the downtown area, and we expect about 70% to the west and 30% to the east, heading towards the airport, Novadia Farm Road. The retail component will be more of an even, although we expect about 55% to the west and 45% to the east. And that's predominantly because the retail shops and restaurants that are being proposed will service more than surrounding neighborhood. It won't have a regional attraction, if you will, of traffic. And then the final step in any traffic study is analyzing what the impacts of that project are. So now we've identified what a future 2023 no-build condition will be like without the project. We've added in the traffic from this project to a 2023 build condition. And then we compare, basically we perform capacity analysis at each of these intersections to determine what the impacts are. Up on that screen behind you, you can see sort of a summarized or bulleted item list of intersections that are currently or will be operating over capacity, meaning there is more traffic than you have capacity to process that volume of traffic. Not surprisingly, the Milestone Rotary has hit that mark already, as has the Fairgrounds Road intersection with Old South Road. And again, both of those are locations where the town of Nantucket has plans to upgrade those locations. With the added traffic from the project, there will be an overcapacity condition at the Lovers Lane intersection, as well as at the main site driveway intersection that is being proposed to service the residential component of this project. The Old South Road and Macy Lane intersection, where the airport is, will actually also operate over capacity. With or without the project, obviously the project adds to that problem as well. So we have a number of traffic improvements that we're recommending based on these analyses of where we see the project will have the greatest impact. You can see obviously from that bulleted list, anywhere where it says that it's being created under the build condition is something that the project owns and needs to fix. Actually, can you go to the next slide, please? So this shows you essentially Old South Road in this direction right here. This is Lovers Lane. This is the proposed retail driveway. You have the Goldfinch Drive exit, and you have the main side driveway to service predominantly the residential component of the project. As I said before, what we're projecting is that we're going to have overcapacity conditions at the main driveway intersection, and we're going to have overcapacity conditions at the Lovers Lane intersection. In addition to that, it's not a big surprise to anyone who drives Old South Road that you have a condition where you currently have left-turning traffic or right-turning traffic into the many driveways. You have the Valero properties across the street, the fish store, the Nantucket Seafood, the liquor store, the market. These are all businesses that create a lot of turning movements. So anytime you have somebody on Old South Road wanting to make a left turn into any one of these driveways, including Lovers Lane and the proposed driveways, it's going to slow down traffic behind them. It's going to stop them through traffic until that left-turning vehicle has a gap in traffic to be able to make a turn. Similarly, because of the volume of traffic on Old South Road, it's very difficult oftentimes, especially during peak hours, to make a left turn out of any one of these driveways onto Old South Road. So what I had proposed to help that situation substantially is to widen the road essentially on the site side of the road, the south side of the road, leave the north side exactly as it is today, but widen the road to create what's referred to as a center left turn lane. And the purpose of a center left turn lane is to allow traffic that wants to get into any one of these driveways to pull into that left turn lane, wait for a gap in traffic, and then make that turn. That gets them out of the way of through traffic, keeps traffic moving, and in addition to that, anybody who's who wants to make a left turn out of any one of these driveways can wait for a gap in this direction of traffic, make the left turn, sit in that left turn lane, that center turn lane, and then wait for a gap in traffic in the other direction, basically making that left turn movement in a two-stage process. And that really helps the capacity. It really helps the ability to make turns out of the many driveways, including the proposed driveways, to a point where we're actually able to achieve from what's currently an F level of service to actually an acceptable level of service. I believe it's a D level of service, if you're familiar with terminology, as I'm sure you are by now. But so that, and I know we're going to get into a lot more discussion actually about this plan, and I'm going to hold further comment on this particular plan until I let your review consultant talk about it, because we've had numerous discussions since we've produced this traffic report, both with your staff and the peer review consultant about changes to this plan, but I'll hold off on that until we get through your peer review consultant. The final location is at the Airport Road and Old South Road intersection. Next slide, please. This intersection, as you know, is a four-way stop right now. Every approach has a stop sign, which is fine. It actually allows for a pretty safe intersection design having that. The problem is, and I'm sure you've all experienced it, is during rush hour, during peak hours, this Old South Road approach backs up quite substantially. There's a heavy demand for right-turning traffic, which really causes a lot of that backup. What we're proposing to do, and again, even though this is a condition that's caused already overcapacity without the project, what the applicant has proposed to do is to widen Old South Road to create an exclusive right turn lane in this direction. So that will really help the capacity of that intersection, pull all of that right-turning traffic out of the through lane. And again, you'll hear your peer review consultant in a short while about possible changes to this, including instead of having the right turn lane come under stop control, to actually channelize it and have it be under yield control. That would require a little bit more widening in that corner and create a channelizing island and have it be under yield control. I didn't show that on this plan because when we prepared this plan, we didn't have survey yet. That survey is underway now, and we'll be able to know whether we have the right-of-way to do that. But if we have the right-of-way to do that, then we certainly will incorporate the recommendations of the review consultant on that. That essentially summarizes the traffic study. I don't know if you'd like to ask questions at this point or hear from your review consultant first.
I think what I'd like to do is, just so we're kind of all together, is to listen now to our consultant, and then ultimately I'd like to hear from staff, because I know they've worked very intimately with all of you.
Right.
And then we'll open it up to the board from there.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks. Patty.
Hi. I'm Nancy Doherty, professional engineer working with Tetra Tech in Marlborough, Massachusetts. And I did the peer review work of Ron's traffic study. So the traffic study was done, was reviewed to make sure that it was done in accordance with current state standards for preparation of a traffic study for development of this scope and size. They looked at, I'm going to repeat a little bit of what Ron said. I'm going to try not to do too much of that, but it's inevitable. They did look at 8 intersections along Old South Road from Milestone Road Rotary all the way down to Nobodaya Farm Road. They also looked at Milestone Road as well as Nobodaya Farm Road, which I thought was appropriate for development of this size. So 8 intersections plus the 2 side driveways on Old South Road. They looked at, as he mentioned, the summer weekday morning, the afternoon, and the Saturday peak hours, again appropriate for a mixed-use development encompassing both housing and retail components. The traffic volumes were collected, as he said, in July and August, but the counts were conducted 2 years ago. We did mention that in the peer review. They were not adjusted to or increased to 2016 levels. And they, in my opinion, they probably should have been bumped up a little bit, but a 2% increase on Old South Road would have, added maybe 30 cars to the volumes that you saw that established the base condition for the traffic study. So we're not asking him to redo that. We're comfortable with the volumes as they are, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. The study did not address potential impacts to the wave system, which I think probably response, which I expect in the next couple of weeks, could discuss that. At least a conversation to make sure that there is capacity on the system that's there today and whatever's projected, what's planned for the Sconset route in the next couple of years. I believe that there's some discussion about expanding it from to a longer time period during the day, which would be great given the amount of residential development that we're adding to the area. Let's see. As he mentioned, they looked at the conditions of traffic 7 years from now, which is appropriate for a traffic study. They looked at the conditions with and without the project traffic. The future no-build volumes, again, the volumes in the future without the project, were estimated by increasing the traffic volumes by 7%, which I agree was appropriate and correct. They added traffic from 6 other projects into the traffic study, accounted for these projects, including the Nantucket Emporium, John Reedy Trust Project, the new Athletic Club on Old South Road, Shepley Woods Project, and the Richmond Great Point Development at Craigland Avenue. They also did add the traffic volume from the recently completed Stop and Shop project on Spark Avenue. that was done back in, I don't know, 2015 or so. The trip generation for the project, the amount of traffic generated by both the retail as well as the residential components of the project were estimated. We would expect the project to increase traffic volumes by approximately 3,400 trips a day, of which about 200 would occur during the morning peak hour and 300 would occur during the afternoon and Saturday peak hours. And there would be a little less because some of that traffic will be pass-by traffic, cars that are driving by at least the retail component. For instance, if the car's heading east, they take a right turn in and go, oh, I need to stop at this, whatever it is, this little shop, and then make a right turn out and continue on the way. And that wouldn't be considered all new traffic. So let's see. The distribution was done by, first they did counts at the Old South Market and on Goldfinch Drive to get an idea of what the distribution would be for both retail and residential, and I think that was a good way to do it, as well as looking at existing flows in the area. The capacity analyses were generally done correctly. We've requested a few minor corrections, and again, I expect to see those in the next few weeks, and we'll review those and make sure that they're done correctly. We have requested that the applicant or Ron provide an analysis of how the project will affect the new roundabout at Old South Road and Fairgrounds Road, because we expect that project actually will be done in the next 2 to 3 years. So I think that probably should be looked at. As Ron mentioned, long queues, some poor levels of service are anticipated at the Milestone Road Rotary, which there will eventually be corrections there or improvements there. Old South Road at Lovers Lane, Old South Road at Main Site Drive, and Old South Road at Macy's Lane. This is where the key problems are expected. In terms of the site plan, we received a plan that was like an 11 by 17, dated June of this year, and we looked at that as a pretty small scale, but some questions and thoughts that came to mind as we looked at it were how bicycle and pedestrian connections will be made to adjacent neighborhoods, and I think some of that will be addressed tonight as we get into the discussion part of the meeting. We hope that the applicant, or we question whether the applicant has met with the fire department, and if the fire department is comfortable with the access through the project into all the proposed buildings on the site. I don't know if there's been any discussion yet with the school department and where the school bus stops would be, and we want to make sure that those school bus stops will be in places that are safe for the buses and the sight lines are good. If any traffic calming has been considered for the residential streets, whether there's speed tables or narrow roadways. We don't have a lot of information on that, but something to ask about. Any wayfinding signs, especially in the condominium portion of the project where there's a lot of roads and driveways, may be helpful. The site distance analysis, as Ron said, was provided for intersection site distance, and that looks like it was correctly done. They did a speed count, which was appropriate. I didn't see calculations for the stopping site distance, which is the distance you need. If someone pulls out of one of those side streets or driveways unexpectedly, the cars approaching on Old South Road would have enough time to, especially where there's a hill there, to react and then stop. Hopefully that condition won't happen if there's good intersection site distance. People won't be pulling out, but it does happen, and you want to make sure you have the stopping site distance. So I'm not sure, Ron, that plan you put up was the same plan that was in the traffic study. There was an island on that one. The plan I saw originally was just a two-way left turn lane. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, go ahead.
That's correct. Actually, we in discussions with your planning staff, again, this plan has been evolving over time, and we did add these two islands in the middle in areas where you don't need a center turn lane to try to green up the area a little bit more. Which is why those were added. But yeah, that's the only difference.
Okay. It's like, wait a minute, where'd that come from? So, as you've probably read in my letter at this point, this is a two-way left turn lane. Although it does provide the capacity that Ron speaks about, it would facilitate the left turns out of the side streets, is not in character with other roadways on Nantucket. It's not desired by planning staff, as I've been told. We're looking for something that not only increases capacity, but is aesthetically pleasing, provides good and safe pedestrian accommodations for people that are crossing over from the development over to the, or back and forth between the development and and the bike path on the north side of the street. And there has been, this is, at this point, this plan is somewhat old. We have requested a plan that shows, landscape median islands through the corridor instead of a two-way left turn. And that is being developed as we speak. We've made a lot of progress, and I think Ron's going to speak a little bit more about the new plan that we're about to show you.
That's the one we're going to talk about.
I'm just going to finish with a couple other minor comments before we jump into this. So this is part of the first part of the mitigation. In terms of other mitigation that's been proposed, as Ron discussed, there is a proposal to add a right turn lane down at the Airport Road from Old South, and we think that's a great idea. I'm not excited about a right turn lane at a four-way stop. I think it's very confusing for people as they approach a four-way stop if there's a two-lane approach. So I really want to see that channelized right turn lane under yield, so kind of bring the right turns out of the intersection. So I hope there is right a way to do that, and I believe that's being looked at now. And then there's some talk about where, right now there's a bus stop shown in front of the retail part of the project, and there's ongoing discussion, ongoing discussion in terms of where else we would do bus stops, and at the bus stops, wherever they end up, we would like to see shelters there as well. And then possibly, I think that, we could encourage the applicant to work with the NRTA to provide year-round service, given the amount of residential development in the area on the Sconset route. So that's it. Thank you.
Great. So, Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you because you're the one sitting in between everything at this point, working with them. And I know that staff has had some ideas as well, too. So just to provide the integrated approach here.
Right, and Mike Burns, jump in here whenever you feel like it. But we have had some discussions about them. Remember, our overall goal from the master plan, from the Noship area plan, is to create a place along Old South Road. We are trying to introduce traffic calming through this corridor. Our own experience out here is that there needs to be moderation of speed through this area as you enter into what will be new as well as existing outflows and entry points. We have worked with a consultant to look at the median to define this area between Lover's Lane and the entrance into the main drive. We've reviewed that with the fire department, and to make sure that there's plenty of room, basically 11-foot travel lane with 5-foot shoulder on one side, 2-foot offset on the other. So there's adequate room within there. We are still looking at different materials. I think we've talked throughout the public hearing about a turning lane with a painted arrow on the middle that just is not going to be an appropriate road design feature. It's not used here. It doesn't really fit at all. And the landscaped median has a chance to get the tree cover that's further down the road on Old South Road, which we might be able to make a little bit, again, introduce some further character here. What else, Mike, are we? We're looking at different materials, and we've asked the consultants to provide some different cost estimates about the 5-foot shoulder that needs to be a solid surface, but different materials that we might consider, like a textured asphalt, like blocks, something that, again, breaks up that overall effect as you drive through. I think that the majority of with the widening of the easement, there is some protected area for cars to make the left, so you don't have the same as a totally segregated lane, but at least there's opportunities for that to happen. And also there's places, refuge points, where pedestrians who are crossing can have a chance to make it to the other side. So this is where we are at this point. There needs to be some further refinement of this. We would ask the board, to give us some direction on that. I think this is a good approach for this area. Mike, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you hit a lot of the high points. I mean, the biggest concern was not losing the traffic calming features that we're really trying to realize with this project. It's like was mentioned earlier, about a 40-mile-an-hour, 45-mile-an-hour corridor. Like it down closer to a 30-mile-an-hour corridor. It's a little more conducive for a pedestrian environment where we envision there be a lot of demand for crossing by pedestrians, especially transit riders and bicyclists that live on the neighborhoods on either side and who want to go to the commercial activities that are on the side of the road. Having those refuge areas are very, very important. The lane widths are a concern. So Andrew mentioned the materials. We're trying to delineate space and confine areas as much as possible, at least give the illusion of confined spaces to achieve a traffic calming effect. We think we do that with the median, with some deflection, and with the landscaping, adding that. The lane width is a bit of a concern, and addressing that with differentiation with material and giving some kind of, a narrow lane look instead of a wide asphalt look. I think now that's the exercise is to find something that's acceptable and achieves that pavement material differentiation that we're looking for. Again, that's the left-hand turn movements are being addressed with the median. I think there's probably a two-step turning process that can happen with that median that will give some relief to congestion. Probably not as much as a left center lane, but again, that's just staff felt strongly that the left-hand center turn lane was just not acceptable. So I think we're getting to the point now to where we think we're going to have an acceptable roadway design. Some of the other congestion issues are at the airport end have been addressed, and we've already had plans, as was mentioned earlier, for intersection improvements at other intersections. So those have already been in the process of being improved. So I think we're getting there.
I think, too, that we've looked at this, again, as part of the overall corridor. There's another area which, essentially around or leading up to the Old South Fairgrounds intersection where something similar like this would probably be implemented as well. And the only other thing I think is worth commenting on is that the cost for this, at least for these improvements in front of the project, would be borne by the developer. We looked at percentages at Macy's and at Old South and Fairgrounds, and they have offered to do 100% at Macy's, which would get the project completely done. And I think we would see instant benefits there as opposed to 10% at one and 10% at the other. We are pursuing a district improvement financing scheme, which would, again, provide some basically segregated public funding to advance the Old South Road and the Rotary reconstruction, which need to be done, as has been pointed out, several years ago. So those need to catch up. We plan on an article this year. It's in development at this point now.
Great. So, Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to the board, but I want to give you a little bit of latitude here with things. You said, because there's some various aspects that you want to talk to with the board to get their sense. So why don't I let you just kind of go through them one at a time, get what feedback you feel as though you need from the board. That way we're kind of synced together as close as we can be, or flesh out the problem areas. And then what I'll do is we'll open up to the public from there. So let me give you that little bit of latitude to kind of guide us through where you see you want us to take each individual point.
I mean, I think the most critical thing is basically the development of this plan and where we are right now, pretty much with the median aspect, to make sure that you're in favor of that. There would be some further modifications. The existing ones would need to be widened at least the 3 towards the closest from basically the main drive going up need to be widened. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to keep all of them if we do that, but again, with a little bit wider, that allows the vegetation to survive on it. These would have some level of landscaping features in them that would have to be maintained, that would have to be part of the homeowners association. Otherwise, we would have a problem with our town manager. But we also want these to be kept in good condition and maintained as part of really the front door of this particular development.
So, board members, on that particular aspect, Nat, why don't I start with you?
Oh,
Go ahead.
and maybe we could just refer to the cross-section.
So,
Am I supposed to be saying something now? I thought you were going to talk more about this.
Well, the median, let's talk about the median.
all right, so there you go. Because I want him to kind of get a feel on each one of these as components, all right, as feedback. So what are your thoughts on the median versus?
Well, I think upstairs the thing doesn't shut off. Down here it's off. I think that we need to. I like the median idea. I just think it has to be perfectly placed. I mean, like we show the picture of the bus stop. I know it's a draft. I know you didn't say that, but it is. It's not technically going to go there. It's just we're showing it in that area, the retail side. I don't think it should be across from a median because the bus, even though they're going to provide enough space to pull over, you can't tell a driver how to drive. You know, they don't really pull over every time, so it needs to be able to the vehicle needs to be able to pass it without too much trouble. But I think that it's smart to introduce this stuff, but it's something we haven't done on Nantucket, but it's going to be an acceptance issue. One thing I wanted to ask you, kind of both consultants, something. You know, when you're doing work on Nantucket, how many times when you're doing all this work, do you say, well, there's no traffic lights ever going to happen? 100, 200 times? You must have a split thing that happens where you say, well, we can't have traffic lights, so we got to do this, but we would do this differently if it was somewhere else. Like it's constantly must be running through your mind because it's kind of like math for Nantucket is different. So you have to find a way to kind of mitigate an impact that could be anywhere in the country, but you can't use traffic lights. So my point of saying that is that stuff gets brought up. We'll never have a traffic light in Nantucket. It won't happen. But did you look at a roundabout scenario at the Nancy Ann, the new Nancy Ann, I call it, the main drive part? Did we look at that as a possible?
Hang on.
Or am I not allowed to talk about
I don't want to
that?
drift too far off of the topic that he wants to be on right now, which is really the median.
Okay. Well, no, it wouldn't if it was just there. You could have different median, you know. I'm just asking if that was looked at other than the left, the two. I noticed you had a turning lane on Nancy Ann. I didn't catch that right away until I looked at the second picture. So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we do work on the island, clearly a traffic signal is not going to be a solution anywhere on the island. So, and you're absolutely right. A roundabout is always a good solution. A roundabout operates generally at least equal to, and sometimes even better than a traffic signal. It depends on the volumes, but really the reason why we didn't consider a roundabout at the main driveway intersection is because an unsignalized intersection there works. It has enough capacity to allow left turns to be made out of that driveway, even without a center turn lane. The center turn lane would obviously allow left turns to be able to be made, like I said before, in a two-stage process, which greatly increases the capacity for that movement. But even without a center turn lane, there's still capacity left to allow that movement to be made There will obviously be additional delays, but traffic improvements you always do in stages and say, okay, well, how much capacity do we get out of these improvements? How much volume do we have? And is it enough? And as long as it's enough, you don't need to take the next step. We are proposing a left turn lane on Old South Road heading west so that left turning traffic into that main driveway can get out of the way of through traffic. And actually, one of the things that, if we want to go back to the other plan for a second.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Could you slide it over to the left a little?
I saw.
No, the other way, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're talking about right where the crossing is there.
Right. I mean, so you see the left
Yeah.
turn lane that we're proposing here. So we have a 3-lane cross section. We have one through lane, a left turn lane, and then an eastbound lane. But because of negotiations or discussions with the North Shore neighborhood, we're also showing on this plan a widening to the east of there
That
to
was
provide a
one.
left turn lane. And this is sort of the match line is right here.
Yeah.
So it matches up a left turn lane into Goldfinch Drive, the eastern end of Goldfinch
Yeah.
Drive.
That's good.
So we're
Yeah.
this isn't something that really has to do with the project itself, because the project obviously isn't going to increase traffic into that neighborhood. But it's something as a good faith gesture, if you will, to the neighborhood to try to make that happen. Now, we've been talking with your planning staff about that, and I know we've had some site walks out there recently. And there are a number of trees, especially along the north side in this area, that we want to try to make sure that we maintain as much as we can. So we're going to go out there and survey exactly the locations of those trees and find out and fine-tune that cross-section, essentially, is what we're talking about. I just wanted to point that out.
Just
as an
one more
addition.
thing while you're standing there, and I'll stop. It's interesting how you say talk about traffic that's already here.
Mhm.
You don't ever say it that way, but that's what you're saying. The traffic that's already here is part of the existing condition.
Right.
So in theory, when you say, well, it's not part of this project for the Goldfinch entrance, well, it isn't, but it's something that is just as important as the already here issue that we already have. I mean, when you brought up the Emporium, I just take the Emporium right out. That used to be R.B. Cochran's and Cam. There's probably less cars now than there used to be. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So just forget that. You didn't bring up something that I don't know how far we're going to go beyond just this part, but when you look at this road, there are the spread them out thing that happens. When we provide other roads that are better, vehicles tend to take different direction that may not have done it before, okay? There's less, the airport is not growing except in the summertime. There's traffic, but it's not like it used to be. So people, it's more of like you've touched on the retail issue. I mean, that's what people are doing in the daytime. There's a lot of activity out there other than residential. So I think we're on the right track, but it was definitely a lot of questions and fine tuning.
Right. Absolutely.
So, no question
This
about
is
that.
a work in progress.
That's all I have right now, I guess. Larry, I don't want to.
Patty, quickly, if you don't mind.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what Ron said with respect to the whole property. I think we've noted this before. What we've proposed to you as part of the entire master plan still has many, lots that are undeveloped. We are being conscientious, though, in our traffic mitigation that we are leaving the engineering in place should there be a need in the future to actually add more to the mitigation. So we're not going to have to rip anything up, and we're not going to have to go bother anybody about more property or more land. So we've asked Ron to sort of do a projection out with respect to the rest of the properties and what we can incorporate and how well it all fits together like a puzzle. So in the future, it may be that we change this up depending on what else is added. So.
Yep. Thanks. Linda?
I have a bunch of questions, but you just want us to comment on the
Well,
median thing,
Yeah, 'cause
right
I
now?
think this is what Andrew wants to kind of focus on, and then he's going to bring us through a few other things that he's going to want some ideas from the board on. So,
maybe I'm missing something, maybe I'm just too tired, but
Could be.
why do I need a median if I'm not getting a turning lane? Where's my turning lane? On this side.
There is a turning lane coming in the,
Do I have to go this way, Mark?
as you come
I got
east,
that
is
one.
that right?
I got that one.
Got what?
Up
And
there.
east,
Go
is
this
there
way. The whole thing has to move this way.
So there's a turning lane into Retail Drive right there,
Still going west.
right?
Okay. Where's coming east, turning lane, turning left? I thought those disappeared when these little green things showed up. But I see a solid yellow line right there, which separates them from that side. But I don't see a turning lane going into the Emporium, the fish place, Valero's.
No, there is,
Maybe I just can't see it.
it's not a full width turning lane, but again, with those easements widened, there's enough room
Pull in.
to pull out of the lane.
Where?
Actually, if we want to go, let's stick with this plan for a sec. This plan, I want to point out, again, this was a work in progress which we've already since changed, or are in the process of changing, I should say. And that is this plan, when we got the review comments that said change the center turn lane into a median with left turn lanes were appropriate and brakes were appropriate, we produced this plan, which essentially has the same cross-section of the road as the center turn lane did, but the maximum we could do within that cross-section is a 6-foot wide median along the stretch, with brakes, obviously, as you see them, to still allow traffic in and out of those curb cuts. We
You're
have
missing
now.
my point. I want to go left into Valero's. I can't do it.
I'm getting there. If you don't. So what we're now working on is widening that median out to 10 feet with 2-foot shoulders on either side. So now you have a total of 14 feet between the two travel lanes, which is the same width that we had before with the center turn lane. So now, if you want to make a left turn into Valero, for example, you actually have the ability to sit in that median break right there and wait for a gap in traffic and make your turn and still have through traffic pass you by.
No, up
The same
there.
can happen.
Up there.
The same happens at every one of these.
So the width of the whole width of the traveled way,
coming in-
including
he's going in
medians,
the out.
is wide, is the
That's how you
same
come
width.
out of
from
Valero's. You go into Valero's
basically-
up the top.
Along that entire stretch.
I don't
Yep,
understand what you're
yep,
saying.
They
exactly.
come out of Valero's right there. They go in up there. There's an in. Generally speaking, people go into Valero's on their upside, and go around and come out on the bottom side.
Yep,
Where the hairdressers are.
yep.
The inn is
I only
shown.
see the bottom side. I don't see the entrance for the upside.
That's
there.
right there.
Right there.
Yep.
Where's the turning lane there?
Again, you have that wide open.
I just don't see a completed plan. Is that what
right.
it is? The plan's
No.
change
The
about
plan
those.
is essentially the same thing, except that the median is going to be wider than what we're showing here. But you have, in that area, you have the same 14 feet of room that you can pull into to make the turn.
And another thing, I was in the Tetra Tech analysis. I can't find it again. I had it here. There was a whole list of stuff that needed to be addressed. One of the things that concerned me was I believe she mentions in yours, did not account for pedestrians and bikes. If the 200 property owners in Nawshawk and everybody coming up and down the bike path on that side want to come across to all these new retails and the restaurant and things like that, where's the pedestrian crossing? She said in here that wasn't even accounted for in your study, that maybe you had to reanalyze it or adjust it to allow for some pedestrian crossings, or how you're going to deal with pedestrians, but I can't find the paragraph again.
That was, I know the paragraph you're talking
Yeah.
about, and that was in reference to the capacity analysis, and we're going to supply your consultant with the information that they were looking for on that. But as far as pedestrian crossings in this particular area, and again, this is still a work in progress, which is why we're seeking input from this board and from your staff. But we're showing a pedestrian crossing at this location so that when pedestrians cross, they actually only have to look in one direction of traffic, cross half of the road, have that sort of safety area where the median is, look in the other direction and cross the rest of the way. We're going to incorporate the same thing over at Lovers Lane where the existing pedestrian crosswalk is. And then we're certainly open to discussions with this board and your staff if there are any other crossings across South Road that you feel are appropriate.
Well, here's the issue. I drive 40, 45. You've got some poor pedestrian sitting in something this wide. They're going to get hit.
If we could
You've got to
go
give them a
the-
better safety zone than this wide.
If we can actually go to the cross-section again.
I don't think it's 10 feet down there. I know it's up there.
That's what the
They've got a
cross-section
turning
says.
lane up here.
Is that 10 feet?
The one that shows the trees. Yep, there we go. So this actually
trees
is an
are
accurate
ridiculous.
representation of what we're now working towards putting together. You, instead of having a 6-foot wide median, you have a 10-foot wide median with a 2-foot shoulder, then an 11-foot wide travel lane, and a 5-foot shoulder. Now, the reason we need to have this total of 18 feet in one direction of traffic is that you have emergency vehicles that need to get through. So cars have to be able to pull off the side of the road and allow emergency vehicles to bypass. But in order so that this doesn't feel like it's a major thoroughfare, what we've been talking about with your staff is to make the shoulder a different material, be it stamped concrete or something or a different color. So that's something that we're currently working on so that when you drive the road, it feels like you literally only have this 11-foot wide travel lane available to you. And then landscape it and things like that.
Why do we need trees?
Makes it
What's
nicer.
the point of a tree there? I mean, I'm not in New Jersey, but what's the point of a tree there
Trees
where
are
there's
nice.
habitually no trees? I mean, nice plantings and stuff like that, that's great. But even in
Again,
Hyannis, they don't have random trees. I just think it looked totally out of character to me, but I understand this is
We'll
just a
take our
rendering.
cue from you.
I just think putting trees there is ridiculous, but that's me.
But in getting to your question about the pedestrians, so now we have literally the 10-foot median plus the 2 feet on either side, which is plenty of safe haven for pedestrians crossing that street.
Okay? I just think you need to really take a look at the pedestrian crossings. There's going to be a
No,
lot of
we
that going on.
absolutely
Let me go back to staff for a second, because I know they've kind of worked hard on this, so I just counterbalance here.
I just
Well,
threw
Mr.
me
Chair-
on the tree thing.
I would encourage the board to take a look at Nanahomick, where they have a treed entryway
This isn't Nanaho.
at the addition, at the entrance to their division.
Yeah, it's like
I
New Jersey.
think that a canopied tree cover over streets is a goal. It's in your subdivision rules and regulations. It's part of what we do. So certainly if you don't want trees, I'm sure the developer would be happy to eliminate them, but I think that street trees add to the environment. They're an important part of traffic calming and an important part of detailing our public streets.
It just looks stupid.
Everyone's going to have an opinion at this
Yeah.
point, so that's...
If I had trees on both sides of the road, I'd get great, put trees in the middle, like the Merritt Parkway. But I don't have trees on both sides. I got nice plantings, which is great because we have a lot of landscapers out there. But introducing trees in the middle of a road that has no trees on either side of the road for that large stretch, except for the entrance to North Shop, is just like, what? I'd love it if we had trees down both sides, but we don't. It's wide open. Not in Valero.
Everyone's entitled to an opinion on the board, so, and you've
I just don't want to change the character. We got to do traffic mitigation, and we have to do medians or turning lanes. I just don't want to change the character of Old South Road to the point of where, oh my God, what the hell's happening? When they put those medians in Hyannis on 132, it just created chaos trying to get across. You can't. You got to go down to the rotary, turn around, and come back.
That was done on purpose.
all right.
No, that's why those. That's
Let's
why those
not go back and
shops
forth here,
left
because-
over there where Ethan Allen was.
Linda,
They all left.
Linda, what else do you want to? We good for the moment?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just don't know where I'm going with that.
Joe?
I've got a few things. In general, I like the medians, and I like the trees. As far as the left, the elimination of the left turning area, maybe it might be an okay idea to label the area that's available, available for turns, or something, put a dashy line, not on the ground, but for us to look at it,
Okay.
rather than
Yep.
Conceptualizing it. And then the tree selection, I would be thinking about, because as they spread, because your cross-section shows cars, there'll be a lot of trucks going down. And also, we have a big house moving component to Nantucket. I don't know. You probably saw a few, so
Right.
that'll be something in the future. I mean, not when you first plan them, but that's something. Then the only other thing I thought of is that Old South Market, that driveway. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that anymore. It's the one right next to Lover's Lane.
Yep. That's
We-
actually
Yeah, we had talked about eliminating the one,
this one?
yeah,
Yep.
the one closer to Lover's Lane.
Yep.
I think we agreed to that.
Yep.
But then the other one, still, when you drive by there, it just doesn't look organized coming out onto Old South Road now. So I don't know if there's anything you can do.
We-
I don't have a suggestion, but it'd be nice if
right,
that somehow when they're coming out with somehow a little more organized.
Absolutely, and that's something that we've just very recently spoken with the planning staff on, is to close that curb cut, and the latest plan that we're currently working on shows this being closed and actually increasing the radius in that corner as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we'll see what we can do to make that, maybe stripe it for
Stripe
an
it
entrance
something.
and an exit lane with a stop line.
Yeah, because a lot of times now you see the trucks are sort of like at a 45, and
Right,
but they're turning right, that
right,
kind of thing.
right.
But that's all. Generally, I like it. Yeah, it's fine. I'm all set.
John?
Well, I'm originally from New Jersey, and I kind of like the trees in the median. I've had a couple of things. Just at the rate of the increase of 7% over the next 7 years in 2023, 1% a year, I'm just wondering if that is an average factor, or does that take into account the rate of construction in the short term of, the next couple of years with the large build-out, and how the traffic's going to be immediately affected with the larger build-out? Or is that spaced out? And it gets to my next question, but looking at the speed right now of 35 miles an hour with the medians, if that increase is developed faster than the overall average of the 7 years, I think that people waiting to get out and pull out at 35 miles an hour is going to be a little difficult, and we talked about bringing that down to maybe 30. I'm actually looking into the 20s as compared to similar to school when it drops down to 20 miles an hour. But I don't know if that can play into that. I'm just wondering if it would help out neighborhoods and North Shop in the new neighborhood to be able to pull out with a lower speed limit there. Well, it's just a concern. I don't know what the legality is, but and my final concern would be where Lover's Lane is. There's a new large Shepley building going there. So I see the turn ratio, no problem, leaving Lover's Lane and making a left where that median is, and I see the trucks coming in, making a right-hand turn. I'm not so much concerned about the larger trucks and UPS down the street coming down and making a left if they had to off of Old South Road into Lovers, but I'm concerned if you've looked at if the turning ratio going from Lovers making a right-hand turn is okay.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll work backwards. We've kept the radius at the Lover's Lane corner the same, in that, I guess, southwest corner right there. as it exists today, which is actually a pretty large radius, and we can take a look to see what a WB50 turning vehicle, a tractor-trailer truck, and what kind of turning path he has.
Just on the pitch, turning right.
Right. But as I said, we will be actually increasing the turning radius in this corner as well to facilitate that better. And with this 18-foot wide half section that you have in each direction of travel, that's actually going to increase the ability for trucks to make those turns, because right now they're pulling it into an 11-foot lane. Now they have 18 feet available. So that should, all of these things should help. But we will definitely take a look at that as well. As far as the turning left out of the
I'm more concerned with the turning
Ken,
right.
Everyone has a turn here at this point, so I want to be a little respectful. You can reserve your comment till we come back.
No, I was more concerned, not so much what Linda's saying, making a left, making that sharp right, because there is that angle. But as you were describing, you have a larger opening.
this turn.
Yeah, coming out there and making a right.
Yep. Okay. Now, we'll definitely take a look at that. As far as the other questions, the growth rate, and going back 10 years worth of data, and these are actually hard numbers, traffic counts that the Nantucket Planning Commission has collected over the past 10 years. Some years are up, some years are down, but on average, it's been about a 0.6 or 0.5% growth per year. The reason that your staff asked us to assume a 1% per year growth is exactly for that reason, because there may be accelerated growth in the coming future, in the near future. So we've accounted for that by using that higher growth rate.
Okay.
Carl?
Oh, you did have one of the questions about speeds.
Well, just a concern with
The concern, as you may be aware, speed limits in the state are set by the state, Mass DOT on every road, not just state highways. And for a town to try to lower the speed limit, you have to document that speeds are in fact lower than what the current speed limit is. So if you want to go from a current 35 mile an hour speed down to a 30 mile an hour speed limit, for example, you have to do a speed study that shows that 85% of the people are traveling 30 miles per hour or less. I've done that speed study. It shows that people are driving 40 miles per hour. You submit that study to the state, you're going to have a 40 mile an hour speed limit on that road. I'd recommend you don't do that.
Well, I guess my question would be, yes, that's based on the road as it's constructed or previously constructed. After you factor in the new medians and trees and things, how does that affect? Does the state come and reevaluate the speed limit based on those changing of conditions?
The town would usually initiate that with the state, because in this case it is your own road. It's not a state road. But with the way that we're going, with the changes that we're making to the plan, with the 11-foot wide lane and a 5-foot shoulder that's actually of a different texture and material, it's going to have a feel. It's going to have that traffic calming effect that Mr. Voris was talking about. So while I can't guarantee that you're going to have slower speeds out here, that's the intent of the design, clearly, is to accomplish that, to allow traffic to go slower. So what you can do once the project is built, the improvements are in, is follow up, do your own speed study and see what the speeds then are, and if it shows that it could be lower to 30 miles per hour, then petition the state to do that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Carl.
Well, that's what I would support as well. If the calming effects were installed with the median and the crosswalks and so forth in the lanes, I would definitely support petitioning the state to bring it down to 30 in that stretch. I think that'd be a lot safer than 35. If people were going 40 or 45 in a 35 mile an hour zone, bring it down to 30 if we could, if it's possible, to bring it down to 30 and see if that would bring them down to 35 as opposed to 40 or 45. So if we could do that, I think that'd be great. I definitely support the trees on the sides and in the median. I think that's a great idea. And I think that would serve many purposes. And perhaps the most important would be the calming effect to driving through that stretch. And there's certainly plenty of trees a little further out towards the entrance to Noshop on Goldfinch, and I think it would complement that very well. And I would definitely support at least 2 more crosswalks that you mentioned up by Lover's Lane, the existing one, and then perhaps down by the retail drive entrance to access the bus stop wherever, if the bus stop does in fact show up there. I think accessing that from across would be a good idea. I'm sure you've thought of that as well. And otherwise, it looks pretty good. I would definitely support the medians, full-size medians. I think it's a good idea. And the traffic slowing. Thanks.
Dave? Thanks. Dave?
I support the mediums as well. I'm from Jersey, so I don't mind the trees either. My biggest concern is probably I don't believe there's that few trips out of there between 8 and 11 in the morning, having been there now. But with the increase you're going to put there, I just find that, inconsistent with just my own observation. Not that I'm a traffic study analysis. It just seems to me there's a lot of cars coming out of there now that are more than that. And maybe it's not the prime traffic time from 8 to 11. It might be from 7 to 8 when all the landscapers and everything leave there. So you're going to comment, so I'll stop.
No, I just wanted to, because keep in mind this, what's going in and out of there today is going to be replaced by this.
Right, but with more density. And I think every apartment or house in there will have 2 to 3 cars.
That may very well be. The thing is, the trip generation is actually fairly accurate, especially for residential developments. The ITE trip generation manual that I mentioned before, I mean, they've done 80 or 90 studies at, just for apartments alone, never mind single-family homes. These are actual counts done at existing residential neighborhoods that they then compare the traffic going in and out versus how many units they have. And those are the trip rates that I was talking about that we then apply to new development proposals. So those numbers, I believe, are fairly accurate. Obviously, there's slight differences in variation depending on location, but on the whole, those are the numbers that you're going to see. The reason that, if you have 225 apartments, for example, that you don't see 225 trips during each of the peak hours is because, not everybody leaves between 7:30 and 8:30. Some people leave before, some people leave after. Same thing coming home at night. Some people work from home. So these are all the factors that go into the reason why you don't have a one-for-one, for every unit you have one trip during the peak hour.
All right. I'd also recommend maybe looking at concrete pavers for the shoulders because they actually exit the speed deterrent when you have to go around something as well.
Yeah, we're actually looking
and they
into
wear
that.
very well.
Yep. That's actually something that we've been actually discussed this afternoon with Mr. Boris.
All right. That's it.
Great. I'm just going to say I concur with most of my colleagues at this point. I like what you're going to do with the median. It makes sense to me. I think the trees can go in. Let's see what it begins to look like. It will give the corridor a slightly different feel. I don't, it's time to move away from the sterile approach that's out there. But anyways, people have also expressed their concerns with the flow of traffic through that area as well, too. I think, again, we look at peak period is where you focused a lot of your information on, and that unto itself causes traffic to move at its own pace. So even if you post 45, I guarantee you're not going to be getting that through there. During the wintertime, when things start to slow down here, maybe that is a more appropriate set of speeds for us to look at. But the thing, too, that doesn't fail me at this point is that if we feel as though that let's go with what we've got before us. If it gets to be too much, then at least we'll have some solid data that we can bring back before the state. I don't want to jump that gun prematurely. I'd like to see how it works on its own and then refine it as need be.
You can now.
So.
You can go down now.
Thanks. Andrew, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, one thought that came to mind with the lots, the home ownership lots. Did we account for just single-family houses, or did we account for multiple units on some of them? I know we haven't nailed down what the mixture is going to be on those lots. I know that you're committing to a certain amount of them to be single-family only, but was it just 100 single-family, or did we count more?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, for the study, we used 100 units as in the formulas for trip generation.
Okay.
So I think the trend we're going in, I think at least, if not two-thirds, close to two-thirds of the single-family subdivision, we're going to self-commit to preclude duplexes, secondary dwellings, and tertiary dwellings. So within the next week or two, we'll have some calculations on that, and then it might be worth seeing whether we should recrank the trip generation if it's going to make a substantive enough difference. But it is a point well taken.
Okay.
But I think we're probably only going to be in the 30 to 40% range of the whole subdivision, even for potential for duplex, secondary, and tertiary. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Andrew, was there more feedback you wanted from the board on certain things?
Not at this time, no.
All right, good. Good. Is there anything else from the board that we want to discuss at the moment? No? Okay, so this is going to be a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen. I know most of you have been here before, so just raise your hand. I'll identify you. Come on up to the microphone and tell me who you are for the record and where you live. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Carl Linval. I live at 5 Boulevard in Surfside. At looking at this, I do like the median approach. One question I have is they're offering a right turnoff lane for the airport, and I don't know why there wouldn't be a right turnoff lane coming into this development. You know, have the same thing that the airport has with a right turnoff lane. Why wouldn't that have?
It really comes down to the capacity of the intersection. At the Airport Road intersection, for example, I don't forget what the exact numbers are, but you have upwards of 200 or more vehicles making a right turn, which in one single lane causes a significant backup on that approach.
But you said there was going to be roughly 200 trips at certain points of the day, and that was multiple different points in the day, so I see that being more than 200 cars turning right throughout the day.
No, because those 200 trips would be distributed, first of all, between the retail driveway and the residential driveway. It also is a distribution. For example, the retail has 55% of the traffic from the west, 45% from the east. The residential has 70% from the west, 30% from the east. So yes, you'll have more right-turning traffic into that driveway than left-turning traffic.
Yep.
But not enough to cause the need for a right turn lane.
Okay, we'll disagree there. The other fact that I have is that right now a lot of the pedestrian traffic seems to cross at the Lover's Lane side of this development and crossing over to where the market and the Old South Diner is. And I think there's a couple reasons, and one is you have a clear sight line of traffic coming left and right, but also if you get down towards where the main drive is on Old South Road, that is probably the peak speed point of the hill. And if you're on a bicycle or walking across, the last thing you want is someone accelerating towards you. I understand that you still want to study this and move this more, but I know that there's going to be a lot of traffic back and forth with pedestrian access. And also with regards to the bus turnoff lanes, I think that bus turnoff lanes should be accompanied by a pedestrian crossway, and in part because of school buses coming down Old South Road. I think it's usually they stop traffic and stops both lanes of traffic. So now that you've got a median coming down, I think it needs to be accompanied by the crosswalk so that kids have safe travel back and forth.
Yep, and I don't disagree with that. Like I said, this is a work in progress, and we're going to work on all of these issues. The one thing about the crosswalk that we're proposing at this location here, the biggest safety factor in determining the location of a crosswalk is sight distance, is so that oncoming cars can see pedestrians in the crosswalk and react in time to those pedestrians. At this location, you have a ton of sight distance in both directions for oncoming vehicles to see pedestrians in the crosswalk. You have very good sight lines right now at the existing crosswalk location. There's somewhat limited by there's about a crest vertical curve right here. You're coming up the hill here, and then it starts leveling off as you approach Lover's Lane. But the sight lines are still okay. Actually, there was one of the board members who commented on having a crosswalk somewhere near the bus stop. We got to be careful at that location because as you're coming eastbound on Old South Road, you start going down the hill. I just need to make sure that we have enough sight lines to the crosswalk. That's all. I don't want to put a crosswalk somewhere where you have people stomping on their brakes to avoid a collision. So.
Sure. My other last concern was, and I don't know if Richmond Development can comment on this, was there was at one point a talk of a grocery store going in across the street where the Valero property is, and I'm really wondering if that is still something that is on the table, and if they're including that thought on putting this median and traffic process in.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. The discussions with and by the Valeros, I don't think have advanced any with specificity in terms of user or potential development for their site or for the remainder of our site as is shown on our master plan. Clearly something may and will occur there in the future. The way these studies are set up and these methodologies, there's only so much you can do to project what you can't predict accurately in the future. And this study has several contingency and conservative assumptions built in to do that. But if a project like the Valeros, which is in total about 12.5 acres, were to come forward, they would have to do their own subsequent traffic study that would identify any incremental or additional development and any additional mitigation that might have to occur, similar to what perhaps Mr. Lowell mentioned or similar to what Ms. Donahue mentioned. And there is room out here to that extent for additional mitigation if additional development that's not currently proposed or specific comes forward, whether that be our site or the Valeros. And we certainly have full confidence, whether it's us or any other property owner on the north side of Old South Road, that they are going to have to come before this board and other boards for discretionary approvals that will trigger those requirements that are very rigorous and are, as the chairman often mentions, subject to multiple public hearings.
So I'm going to speak on kind of one last piece is that, you know, I really think, as Mr. Callahan said, that your estimates of traffic going through this are greatly underestimated. I understand that they follow state, study and science, but there's also Nantucket has a housing crisis, and I highly doubt that there's going to be one car per household per unit, and I highly doubt that they're only making one trip per day. I took 5 trips today. I went to the dump, came home, I dropped my kids off at school, came home, I went to the gym, came home, I went to work, came home, I came here. So I mean, and that's just me.
I never said that there's only one trip a day.
Yeah.
What I said is that we have very good data that shows how much traffic a project like this will generate during the peak hours of the day. Now, keep that in mind because every traffic study, we have to focus on the worst time period of the day, and that is usually, as is in this case, the weekday morning and afternoon rush hours. That's when you have the most amount of traffic on the streets already. That's when you're going to get the most amount of traffic from this particular project because for the same reasons, they're going to work and coming home. And we've also studied the Saturday peak because there's a retail component which is going to generate more traffic during that time period. So the numbers that we're talking about are only for 1 hour of the day, not 24 hours.
Thank you very much.
Actually, Madam Chairman, if I could, to that point, and maybe either Mr. Mueller or Ms. Donahue could look it up in the meantime, the average daily trips or total daily trips have been calculated, and those round out to, I think, somewhere in the vicinity of 6 to 8 trips a day per residential unit, and that's factored into the study. We could probably give you that information before you leave tonight. Again, the stated numbers of the 200 in the AM and the almost 300 in the PM are just during that peak hour. The full day trips, like you mentioned, you probably made 5 or 6 trips, you said. So those are accounted for in the study. Yeah, the total average daily trips for the project is about 3,400, whereas each peak is about 200 and 300. It tends to be somewhere around 8 to 10% of the total traffic per day in each peak, and this is pretty well calibrated to that. So we can give you the actual average daily trip data for each type of use to reassure you that that's been baked into the results. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else like to come on up? Everybody who speaks, please identify yourself and where you live. I know.
Jean Grimmer, 47 Goldfinch Drive. Through you, we are very pleased on the North Shop Trustee Board with the level of communication from Richmond Great Point. It's been great to have this level of communication as well as the plans that are before you. However, regardless of what the median looks like, we are still very concerned about the turning left from the only exit out of North Shop. This is compounded with our concern about the flooding in this area. And I know the purpose of tonight's meeting is only to deal with traffic, but it's virtually impossible to turn left now without the increase in traffic.
Well, that's really the reason why we had proposed the center turn lane as is documented in the traffic study, because you have left turns coming out of the many driveways, not just Goldfinch Drive, but the Valero driveways, Nantucket Seafood, Lover's Lane. I mean, all of these have left turning volumes to different degrees, which is why I thought that creating the center turn lane would be a benefit in this particular area. Now, I understand very clearly the need to sort of balance the capacity for each of these driveways and intersections and the ability to make left turns with the town's desire to create a more aesthetically pleasing corridor, to try to slow traffic down. Clearly having 42 feet of pavement width that you would with a center turn lane wouldn't slow traffic down, versus the approach that we're now going with would have a tendency to slow traffic down. Slowing traffic down will create greater gaps in traffic, generally speaking, making it easier for left-turning vehicles. The other point I'd like to make is, and again, this plan shows right now 6-foot wide medians, but when we make those 10 feet wide with 2-foot shoulders on either side, we're going to end up with the same 14 feet that we had with the center turn lane concept. So you still will have the ability to make a left turn out of Goldfinch Drive across half of the roadway, wait in that median area for a gap in the other direction of traffic, and then continue on. Effectively, it'll be the same improvement to you. In fact, if anything, is you don't have, obviously this is an exit only, so you don't have anybody entering at that location, making it even better from that perspective. So while it's not necessarily designed for that, you still have the same room available to you to make that turn in a two-step process. So it should help to process left-turning traffic. That combined with the fact that the aim of this is to try to slow down traffic, I think all of these things will help mitigate not only the impacts of this project, but actually make it better for you than what it is today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm going to stay there for a second, because I think what's throwing a lot of people is where the green is. I don't think the green's properly placed. I know you put it on there just as a concept, but I think what Gene is talking about, coming out, taking a left, that this end of the green needs to be cut back, so you can come back at a cross at an angle. Right now, you come in at a perpendicular angle. You can't make that turn safely. So I think what we're talking about is just cutting the
Just
openings
cut this back to
that
maybe
back that
this
way, and that's the
yeah.
same thing we were talking about trucks down at that end.
Mhm.
I think the medians need to be cut back to give people more angled to get actually continue the turn instead of coming straight across, then having to take a left turn.
Yeah.
So I think that's what, yeah. The perception is that some of where the median cuts are, they're not cut back enough to give you an angle to get in and out, whether it's a split axle or whether it's somebody coming out of North Shop. And I think that was one of the concerns, how are you going to get out and go left, because you can't.
We can definitely look at. I mean, this is a concept.
That's
So
what I
these
figured.
are all. This is why this is great input. I mean, this is why we want to hear from the public and from the board clearly, is to be able to fine tune this plan and come up with eventually a design that's going to make everybody happy. Hopefully, everybody happy. But absolutely, no. That's. I guess I didn't quite understand.
Just want to just add something to what Linda just said, and staying right on this spot, okay? You know, and I want to bring up an old sort of thorny issue, but the stop sign at Lovers Lane for all those years. We were sitting in traffic, just sitting there, like, just because, for like so long, till we finally got rid of those stop signs, and there was a lot of political issues, and people were unelected because of this, or elected because of it. It's amazing what happened. So here we are. I like to kind of like sort of bring back the past a little, because we forget that this stuff even happened. So now we're talking about we're going too fast, we want to go slower. We were stopped. Okay, stopped. And all the way to Amelia Drive, okay? So I think, sometimes you have to get a fresh sort of perspective to something old. So you don't say, oh my God, what are we doing? You know what I mean? I think that with this done right, that's why I said to you at the beginning, this has to be right one time, okay? This is why I don't take anything negatively. If Nancy did this and you were the other person, she'd be up there right now. We'd be saying the same thing. So, but all of this does slow you down, because you see, oh my God, okay, well, this is what's going on. I'm going to start slowing down. And is it true you can't go, I thought you could go to 30 without the state, not 35. I don't know if I'm 100%. Is that true, Mike? I thought it was 30. But never mind. It's just something I thought was true. But anyway, the stuff that Gene brought up is right. Okay? The people here that drive, in the old days, if we did this in the old days, nobody would know what a median was, because no one went off island with their car. Now everybody knows how to drive off island, so they know, okay, well, this does work somewhere that I've been. If we do this right, it will work. Okay? And some of the median may have to be set up where you can drive over it, where it delineates the asphalt, but you can drive over it, like we do with the roundabout at the post office. Okay? Something like that, without the tree part. You know what I mean? But less people take a left out of Goldfinch, because they're going to town most of the time. Turning right into, I want to bring that back up to something Kyle brought up when he was speaking, the main drive, whatever we're calling it. You need a turning. We have a turning lane that we don't even know is a turning lane, but everybody uses it. Fairgrounds to Old South. If that road wasn't wide there, traffic would be backed up to Rugged Road. Okay? It's a turning lane that's not marked. It's just wide. You don't need one there, because you're just going to kind of go right. You're not waiting for the person that's taking a left, backing you up. So I think that will work. But the land is going to be there, I believe, right? Am I correct? We're not building anything there. So technically, the right-of-way or the land from the developer will be there if there's an improvement needed. So I'm not concerned about the right turn to that level. Okay, I think all this other stuff has got to be addressed more than that at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate your patience.
Chris Trost. I live on Bluebird Lane and also work on Old South Road. And I might be behind the eight ball, but I believe there is an approval of the special permits for the density development that's going in that Richmond is doing. So I think the traffic study is being done to see how successful the flow will be on Old South Road when that whole development is built out to its full density. So with 225 units and 100 houses, doing my best, I only got a copy of the traffic study a week ago or a day ago. Trying to read through it all is challenging, so I respect all the work all of you have done looking at this ahead of me, but I really feel that having traveled this road all day, every day for work and home, that having the study done in 2014 and assuming that a 1% increase in the last 2 years is adequate, I think is absolutely inadequate. If you drive Old South Road, you know that in the last 2 years that traffic has grown exponentially. And I think that we are really remiss if we don't pay attention to that. I don't think we're doing a service to the greater good of the island. And it's not just because I live there, but this is a thoroughfare used by people all over the island. They get to the airport, they go to Amelia Drive to get their hair colored. They go to get seafood at the fish shop. Now they're going to be going to get lumber. I mean, this road is used by everybody. And I really believe that we have to look at the greater impact to this roadway by the amount of density that this development is going to be adding to this area. I think the traffic study that we're looking at, which is what I believe the purpose is to see how this traffic flow will be affected by the density of this development. I don't think it is adequately, and I don't understand all of the details of how you come up with it, but I can tell you 1% is not the increase that has been realized in the last 2 years. And if you're adding 700 living bedroom spaces, to say that there's 200 cars in the morning during rush hour coming out of there is absolutely not right. Because most people that live here work. And most of those people have to go to work in those morning hours. And we have already seen that Old South Road can be a traffic jam year-round, not just in the summer. So if you add that volume with the summer, I think we have to look at the big picture of the island and how Old South Road functions as a thoroughfare. And I implore you as a planning board to reconsider this traffic study and figure out if it is really appropriate to where we're going. Because I don't believe the 1% increase in the past 2 years, I mean, it said somewhere in the study that it should be within 2 years. I'm wondering if it needs to be redone with where we are today before we approve these extra permits, these extra developments that are going to add so much more density and traffic to that area.
Thanks. Just one thing I do want to say to you is this is why we use our own consultant to vet their report as well, too. So I think
there was a comment in her report that said it should have been done more recently than 2 years, but she might
could you,
not go.
yeah, could you just quickly, Nancy, thank you. Could you just quickly readdress that?
Sure. So the counts were done almost exactly 2 years from the time that when the study was submitted. And I believe the planning department has shown us many times before the traffic has been increasing at a rate of about 1% per year on the island. And yes, I think ideally that the existing volumes obtained in 2014 should have been increased by 2%, which would have added, like I said, 20 to 30 cars during the peak hour. And I didn't feel like that would substantially change the outcome of the traffic study, the results and the findings of the traffic study, and that's why I didn't ask them to redo the counts. So, if that helps.
Thank you.
And the other thing I'd like to, can I address one other comment
Please.
that came up in terms of the trip gen comment that's come up a couple
Yeah,
times
please.
now. It's interesting that the gentleman mentioned the number of trips he made today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Roughly 5 round trips or 10 total trips. It's amazing, but the trip gen manual that Ron spoke about, if you look at the daily trip rate for our single family home, is 10 trips. So I think we're pretty good. and I have done recently, I've been, like someone said, I've been on the other side of this as well, and I have done counts to confirm the trip rates in certain communities, and I do find the trip generation manual to be a pretty decent document for predicting trips, especially for residential development, if that's helpful.
Thanks. I'll let you come back in a minute. Okay. But I do want to say this is why we bring in a second consultant and then again one more time that's vetted through our staff as well, too, with using Mike Burns, who's our traffic consultant as well. So you've got 3 independent sources running this scenario. I just, let me finish one. So I'm just saying to you, is that if it were from one person, I think you see one thing. And trust me, when we engage our own traffic consultant, we want them to do the critical analysis. We want them to find the flaws. We want them to take the hardline approach to what needs to be done with it.
So with all due respect, I guess what I don't understand is if you're saying there's 10 trips a day, maybe I should address the question to those of you that know this better than I, but how do 700 bedrooms, which is what the total build-out would be at plan, how do they equal 200 trips during the peak season only, or during the peak time of day only? That doesn't make any sense.
Right, well, certainly those bedrooms are not all used by adults.
But if you look
And
at
not-
Nantucket ratio of bedrooms to cars, I think that you would find that the number is greater perhaps than the average, which maybe is the trip number that you use. Because if most bedrooms, if we all looked at all of our residences and how many bedrooms we have or how many cars are at each residence, it's a way above average number. So I just feel like those numbers are not adequate to what.
Well, in the past, certainly the studies I've done, I find the trip gen rates to be appropriate
For
to
Nantucket?
use. I haven't confirmed them on Nantucket. Can't say that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Lucille, go ahead. Hi.
Hi, Lucille Jordan. I live in Nasha, at 8 Curlew. A couple of things. I know when I pull out and I want to make a left-hand turn out of Goldfinch, I'm always looking at a long sight line. Now, granted, some of it is because traffic can be moving fast. I'm looking, to the right at what's coming at me and to the left, obviously. And once you put that median strip of trees in there, that's going to block my sight line. It would be lovely to think of things slowing down, but I was sitting there thinking, but aren't we talking about volume? So slower traffic, but lots of traffic. And to Chris's point about, Carl said he, did 5 trips a day and he's one person. So, obviously, his wife is doing probably 5 trips a day or 10 ins and outs, like the consultant said. I'm going to hearken back to when we got into some trouble with Sherburne Commons. They interviewed people and they said, what would you like to have in your facility? And people were moving from a house into a supposedly over 55 community, and they all thought the idea of having a big house would be lovely. And then look what we got. I say Nantucket's different than the mainland. Because we all live relatively close to our homes, we tend to easily go home, easily make a grocery run, easily do this. So I think we have a higher generation of round trips, and I agree with Chris. The traffic's gotten outrageous. So I just think that it's inadequate to use off-island numbers and to use that because I don't think that an island follows quite that parameter. So thank you.
Thank you. In a minute, David. Thanks. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Bint Rustad.
You can pull that down a bit if you want. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Bint Rustad, 85 Goldfinch Drive. And I just, I didn't keep track of any numbers, and I didn't do any photographs of this, but especially July and August, this summer, when I'm coming out of Goldfinch, I wanted to get all the way over to go down to the Jetties Beach. It is already backed up past Goldfinch, going into town. I take a left. Sometimes I've had to go all the way over past, Surfside Road and come all the way into the back way into town because everybody is filtering in from 3 different directions. But this goes on until sometimes like noontime. You've got the airport traffic. You've got all sorts of traffic. And I agree with the people that just spoke ahead of me, because it's the numbers are astonishing, and it is. I don't think any study statistically, will equate to what we are enduring through here. And it's, as he said, it's not just Old South Road. I mean, we're looking at all the different cutoffs, trying to get somewhere across the island into town. Sometimes I have to take a left to go up and then back down and come in Milestone Road, because you can't move on Old South Road. So I'm just really, really asking, and I agree with the trees. Any blockage of foliage puts a risk, in watching pedestrians. Bicyclists don't stop when they're supposed to. They go ripping on through. You've got a lot of traffic, and we don't want to add more risk to this. So please help us get the study done so that it will really work. And I have a lot of questions about those meridians. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. David, thanks. Let me grab him.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
Dave Small, Daffodil Lane. I just had one question back to Linda's original comment about trees on both sides of the road and in the medians. And we're worried about sight lines without trees to begin with, and wondering what size trees you're planning on putting in there, height-wise, and what that's going to do to the actual sight lines, and then future growth. That's my only comment.
Yeah, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, we haven't got to that point, but about what we asked you for direction tonight and got it, and we'll be developing that, obviously with concern about that the limbs are higher, et cetera, so.
Go ahead.
Ask Ron a question. Lovers Lane, I'm back to my spreading out terminology. That's what I call it. I don't know what you call it in the big world. Spreading the vehicles out, diffusing, they're going to go a different way, path of least resistance. With the boulevard is getting fixed, finally. The other roads are going to, Ockerwa and Monahanset. This is all like real. Like this affects this, okay? With the already here traffic, there isn't one person sleeping at Richmond right now over there. Not one bed, okay? We have traffic now that's already here. The cars aren't driving to Nantucket to live in these houses. There's going to be people that are here. So there's a certain element to that too. But really, I'm more speaking towards when the roads are improved, the Lovers Lane and the boulevard and stuff. Is there a way to calculate? And I know this is not that easy to do, but there are people that they're certainly not going to go in a certain direction today that they might in say 20% of the trips, or because I agree with what this thing about 10 trips a day per person or 5 a day. I mean, I go home twice a day, but if I forget to let my dog out and I don't go home at all, I got a problem with the dog. But I don't, you know what I mean? Like I don't go home more than 2 times. That's just me, okay? On average. But other people go home more. Some people don't go home at all. So it's a mix. I mean, you have to have a number that's an average, right? So the statement that was made, Nantucket people go home more because they're close. That's true. That's absolutely true. They also make a lot of trips to the same places because they're right down, I think I'll go back to Cumberland's. You know what I'm saying? So it's complicated here. But I think that we have to look at this for the next hearing on the spread it out, sort of what's going to change in your mind percentage-wise with people maybe going through Greg Glen and taking a left now. They might not come out at Lovers Lane onto Old South anymore, depending on where they're going. So that's my point. A lot of the traffic that's coming from Daffodil and the existing residences in the Evergreen area when those roads are fixed, they might not go Old South anymore. They might go the other direction, depending on what they're doing and where they're going. Going to school, they're certainly not going to go Old South anymore. They're going to go the other direction. That's all I'm saying. There's a lot of pieces to this, and just for the record for everyone here, these consultants, and I know we sound like we're talking to off-hour people, they are, but they've done work here. And we always try to get a consultant that's been here and done other stuff. So that's something that I think the public should know, that you didn't just show up here yesterday, like, who are you? You know what I mean? So thank you very much.
Actually, I did some very quick calculations because this issue keeps coming up about that Nantucket trip generation should be different than what we're assuming. Oh, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
We have the Norshop neighborhood. We counted how much traffic comes out of Goldfinch Drive. There's 196 units of single-family homes back there. I just did some quick calculations about what the trip rate is and compared that to what we used. What we use is about 20% higher than what we observe at Goldfinch Drive. So I think that should be a fairly solid argument for why what we used is actually higher than what we see on Nantucket.
Yeah.
Can I speak to that?
You can wait a minute,
Okay.
actually.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's why I have you recognize.
And one more thing, too, on this calculating. The Goldfinch is a seasonal, not totally seasonal, but it's more seasonal than, this is going to be
Probably half.
mostly year-round. At the 100, it's hard to say exactly how that's going to flesh out. So again, this is going to, that neighborhood isn't creating the same number of, if that was residential year-round housing at Goldfinch, we'd have roads going out to Sconset on the backside of Hinsdale.
We counted the traffic going out of there in July. So.
Yeah, well, that's good. I knew that, but that's why I'm saying it, because we do, as was mentioned, we have a year-round traffic issue now, and I wanted just to make that point.
Absolutely. I mean, and to keep in mind, the study focuses on peak month conditions, so we're analyzing conditions during the absolute worst time of the year. So.
Thank you. So, Andrew, just Nat did. Yeah, I know, but I just want to bring up a few points. How long has Tetra Tech worked for us? Roughly.
Probably. Yeah, I was going to say
Almost about
20,
15
15,
years.
20 years.
So they do have experience here on the island. Let me not forget that. Okay, this isn't a new project for them, and they've never been out here before. They've worked with Andrew. They've worked with Mike, who are both very seasoned out here as well too. This is where they get their guidance from. So believe me, these numbers. You may say there's a Nantucket rate. But on the other side of the coin, I'm going to say that gets vetted through some people who take this thing very seriously, who have experience out here as well too. So, and it's not, it doesn't fail me either, because as we've really looked at this thing, you got to remember, Old South Road really hasn't changed much for ever since I've been here, which is now closing on 25 years. It really hasn't changed much. It's gotten more in terms of what's on there, but the roadway itself hasn't really changed much. And I got to say, as you've put a few more things out there, what doesn't fail me is, just like I see on other parts of the island, a left-hand turn is one of the most devastating things that begins to happen. Because people aren't as courteous as you may think they are. So all of a sudden, believe me, I've sat at intersections and people are like, okay, you make it, oh, that's nice, I'm going past you anyways. And that'll go in for 3 or 4 minutes, and all of a sudden you got to realize, guess what's backing up behind me? Okay, just for that one turn. Now start thinking about how many people who are behind me, who are now all waiting at this point, are going to make that same left turn. And it gets a little crazy after a while. So that's why we're not just suggesting that you've got to take a slightly different approach here to look at some of the suggestions that we're coming up with to try to alleviate some of those problems that we've identified. Yeah, if it were left in a static state, you're right, it'll be a living hell. But we need to address and upgrade what's already there. This is an opportunity under which to do it as well, too. Even if we did nothing with this, we still need to fix it. So there's kind of the thing to keep in mind. What you're watching is a roadway that has been, just like Monahasset, just like the Boulevard, that's just been left. And this is a frustration I have as a resident. It's just been left. You know, this is where we have to rely upon boards like the Board of Selectmen, because they're the authority ultimately to do this kind of stuff. They have got to generate the money from the town under which to do it. They have got to be willing to take on certain things. So that's why, you know, when these opportunities come along, we try to take them seriously, and we try to look at what is it we can do to make these improvements that need to happen. So, as Mr. Lowell said, yeah, we want to try to get this thing right from the first thing. I'm a little bit more of a believer that, you know, perfect should never be the enemy of the good. Is this thing going to be perfect when it's done? It's not. I'll be the first one to tell you that. Will it be good? Oh, I believe it will be. Will we need to fine-tune it along the way a little bit? I think so. But we need to start somewhere. We need to start somewhere with the process. And this is where you see us right now, is starting somewhere with a solution to a problem that's been hanging out there for a while. So, you know, we do appreciate your input, but it's not, like I said, please don't expect perfection on the first run here. It never happens. But we're going to try to make it as damn good as we can. Thank you for allowing me to do that, Carl. Go ahead. Did you have something?
No, you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to comment on this? Mr. Arminetti. And I will have a question for you before we close.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I feel somewhat compelled to address, just so we don't all leave the room with maybe a misunderstanding, and I'm not so much doing this in defense of either our consultant or the peer review consultant, and people's perceptions are obviously very important, and they don't lie, but in some ways, I'm going to sound maybe like Mr. Lowell here in my philosophizing a little bit, but sometimes your eyes might deceive you, in that people should be assured, particularly with respect to the overall growth rate of traffic through this corridor, it's looked at in a very detailed manner every year, sometimes multiple times a year, by the staff. And these aren't guesses, and they're also not people in lawn chairs out there with clipboards that might fall asleep during the count periods. These are very sophisticated video counts that are checked for quality control and checked again. And despite what we may think, even though our perceptions are such, and I won't discount for the fact that even though I'm a relatively recent semi-wash ashore, I'm here enough to understand a little bit of the dynamics that go on. Certainly in traffic, if you're here on a Monday morning after a holiday and it happens to be raining and no one's going to the beach and everyone's going downtown or everyone's out shopping and running their errands, that's probably the worst traffic day of the worst traffic season of the year. And I happened to come in one morning, I think after July 4th this year was a rainy Monday morning after the holiday, or Tuesday after the Monday holiday, and it was probably the worst day we've all ever experienced. So keep that in mind a little bit. The 1% growth rate, which is actually almost double what the actual growth rate is over an average, does play out accurately. But we realize there are aberrations in that. And in our business, the phrase that's used, and it relates to traffic design a little bit, is you can't design the church for Easter Sunday. Because the other 364 days a year, there aren't that many people in the church. So if we were to design to that Tuesday after July 4th when it was raining and everyone was coming into town, Old South Road would have to be 10 lanes wide with no medians. So we try and find that middle point, kind of what you were speaking to, Mr. Chairman, which is you do analyze for some worst case and you make sure there's conservative assumptions and you do the best you can. And it may not sound accurate to people, but this data is compiled through very accurate sources over time, and Mike should probably speak to this more than I should, but we have every confidence in the world that the data that this whole study is based on is accurate and sound, and if anything, conservative. And we're all working together here to get to the same place, and we want this to be something we can all be proud of so that 5 years and 20 years when we come back, we've done the right thing, and as Mr. Lowell said, we got it right to the best we can, knowing that it'll have to be refined over time. But we have every confidence that we're starting from a good place, and we're going to say, trust us, we're here to work with everybody, and we are going to have to refine it over time, but the public should be assured that the basis for this study is pretty darn rock solid. So, thank you. And
Thank you.
Said you had a question. That's all.
I do have a question for you, because there's a lot of moving components, and I'm not expecting an answer tonight, maybe, but it does need to come up. And that is, when do you begin to anticipate, I know groundbreaking you want to get to as soon as possible, But there's a threshold where the town needs to kind of start glomming onto as well, too, about when do we need to start getting real serious about things when you're at 50, 66% build out. So I'm going to want to start asking you, when do you envision that occurring? I know there's multiple parameters underneath it. And that's why I don't want to rush you into an answer tonight. But maybe by our next meeting, just starting to project ahead for us a little bit about where you see your development, kind of, you know, where and when. Because I know doing these things, coordinating with the Board of Selectmen, trying to do the diff, these are all going to take time. But having a master timeline underneath it will begin, I think, to help us out a little bit too. So I just want to throw that onto your plate maybe for the next meeting.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, that's very appropriate, and we can do that. And the other thing I'll say, mainly more to reassure the public, because the board is very versed in this, and we are as well. I'm sure, if we're fortunate enough to get approval here, there will be some conditioning that has some look-back scenarios in it, in addition to the fact that you're always very good at, Mr. Chairman, of explaining to people that because we have special permit review, which is a higher level of review, these approvals can be looked at again and public hearings can be reopened. But beyond that, I think given the sophistication of the staff here and the sophistication of your board, I wouldn't be shocked at all if there are some conditions in an approval, if we're fortunate enough to get it, that says at a certain point you need to look at this again, and if it's different, you might have to fix it differently. That happens all the time, and it's something that we're certainly versed in doing, and it would be appropriate here. And again, mainly it reassures your constituents and the public and our neighbors here that there is going to be a look back and a governor on things, and if we got it a little wrong, there's going to be an opportunity to refine it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just give me 2 seconds. Andrew, are we good here?
Yes.
Is there anything else? Okay, so go ahead, Nat. Thanks.
I just want to address something else that Gene Grimmer brought up, the drainage issue. Dave, have we done a coordinated review with DPW? Those catch basins are flower pots on the side of Valero's. They just might as well have a rubber inner tube over the top of them. That area has never been bermed right, all the sand runs in. Is that part of all this, getting this fixed? I mean, we talked about it at a few public hearings ago, but I kind of skipped it because it wasn't part of our discussion. But she brought it up, and I don't want these people to come to these meetings, and if we don't, you know what I mean? She's right. They don't work.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Lowell's question. Exactly. We continue to look at that, particularly with Noshop. I mean, I think one of the first things they said to us when we sat down 3.5 years ago was, if you could fix the lake between us and Valero, that would go a long way towards making our life easier. And we are continuing to look at that. And the catch basins out there now, just because there's so much demand on the DPW and there's only so much time in the day, they do get kind of petrified and sealed up pretty quickly, and they don't get vacuumed out anywhere near as much as they should. And we have a lot of silt out here because we have a lot of wind and we have a lot of conditions like that. So the improvements that will come through here with the road will be the perfect time to assess that in more detail. And we have had specific conversations with the DPW staff about, in addition to any drainage that will be required for our project, that any additional drainage that might be required to accommodate that additional flow will be worked into this design and will simply be funded by the town. So we are going in that direction, specifically with respect to the drainage that comes off the Valero property to the southwest towards Noshop and now has to get diverted into the pumping station. That condition will be cured once these improvements all get made. It's a very good question, and that will happen.
It is something that, yeah, thank you.
Great. All right, board members, next meeting is scheduled for the 14th, which is part of our regular public hearing.
Right.
I understand. I have to look and see what I've got for a work schedule. Sorry. Well, remember, we've tried to move to a consent agenda as well, too, which All right, well, if you're not going to be helpful with trying to move things ahead at this point and cause all right, so, yes, we did, and I'm going to address that with you on a different basis.
I'm open.
So basically, you're suggesting I'll get to miss the public hearings? So you're going to keep people waiting?
We're not waiting until 7 to start the public hearing anyway.
Let's do 6:30.
No, that's what was scheduled by. It's a very
Oh,
long
it was
meeting.
6
We
too?
don't want a special
Oh,
permit.
okay.
And their staff would like to start at 6 also.
Yeah, half an hour to do the A&Rs and second building.
There's 12 new ones.
Good deal.
But if you can, I'm just going to say to you, if you can see yourself clear toward doing a consent agenda, I think we can get this down to within 7 to 8 minutes. That's why I'm trying to move in that
Yeah,
direction.
no, I agree with that.
Are we closing this public hearing?
What I'd like to do is start it at 6 and get rid of a lot of the stuff.
Right, so,
We shouldn't be held hostage because we all have very long schedules. Staff would like to start at 6. It's a very long meeting. I'm not staying until 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock again. So I'd like to make a motion. Start at 6 o'clock for the 14th. It hasn't been posted yet.
is there a second to that motion
Second for discussion.
for discussion?
Since we're talking about this,
It's one day a
right,
month.
hold on. With the Richmond thing, it has added a lot of time. I mean, I don't think this was an issue before. Even when it was busy, it was easier than with the Richmond stuff has to come in. You can't have a special meeting for every Richmond public hearing. The people would be out of their minds,
We've
right?
already had in mind.
But the consent thing, Barry, if once we get that down pat, can we change the agenda so that the public hearings, so that first half hour, we can deal with the A&Rs and second dwellings? And
That's what I'm
then,
saying.
no, I know you are, Linda, but I'm just trying to say it in a more professional, no, not professional, but you know what I mean. Legible, I understand what happened at the last meeting was, confusing and inappropriate and everything else. But I didn't understand it either, to be
'Cause it
frank.
didn't
Didn't really
speed it
understand
up
what we
at
were
all.
doing. Sorry. But now that we kind of understand it, Barry, and maybe we can talk about that, I think that's a good way to move forward. Is that right or no,
There's a motion. This is yours.
Barry? What's your opinion of that? I'm just asking.
But there are like
It's
7
not
other
like
people
every
here.
meeting would have to be 6 o'clock.
Never
It's
mind.
just
You-
right.
And staff.
Listen. I've
Those are yours.
noted that,
I
unfortunately, what can I say? You've got people who are working who have to be on this board as well, too, and I'll try to do my best, and that's as simple as that. I just am, never mind.
It's just one day a month, Barry.
I understand.
And I know you're the only
I
game in town over there, basically, where you work. So you don't have as much flexibility.
Sorry, what can I say? That's.
Well, I made a motion
That's right.
to start this one at 6
Right,
because
and
it's so
there's,
long.
and there is discussion, and
Yeah.
you know what? I'm going to say something too.
Would it?
That's yours.
If, some of these meetings, I get a little flabbergasted at because you guys are given adequate time under which to do things, and then other people start to comment and they'll rushed along because now you want to move things ahead. It's damned unfair.
Well, Barry, that
It's
has nothing to
damned,
do with this
no, it does
discussion.
have a lot
It
to
does
do with
not.
it, because you're doing it right now. It has a lot to do with it.
It's not on the topic of what.
Yes,
you
it
have.
is.
It is
Linda,
not.
It is.
It's because
It
we have
is.
12 new special
Because you're
permits and all
talking.
the rest of them.
See, you do this all the time, too. You tend to.
I'm telling
every
you why
time-
I made the motion, that's why.
Right, and, oh, I see, so I'm not supposed to have any discussion.
No, but you're
I-
attacking me for it, and that's not
I'm just,
appropriate.
you do this all the time.
No, and you attack me all the time, so let's call a spade here. The reason I made the motion is because of the
And I-
length of the thing that's coming next month. It's like a bear. The thing is a bear. It's huge.
Okay. I mean, can I just?
There's no sense in discussing this. There really isn't. There really isn't, because there's only one viewpoint.
There's not a viewpoint there.
There is. Thank you.
I just made the
I've-
motion for that reason.
12?
That's all.
Is there further discussion from the board?
Well, I think it's important the staff has input too, then. I didn't realize it was 12.
To make a point, it's specifically for the next meeting only.
And with the agenda being so large, I would be in favor of coming here early, but that's my
Thank you.
availability.
Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Aye.
Opposed.
Thank you.
Carried.
3 to 2.
14th.
November 14th.
That's a regular meeting.
I wouldn't mind capping it.
Yeah.
Yes.
What?
6.
Capping it at 10 or something.
Yeah, but we can't have,
We only meet once a month, and we don't have another one scheduled.
That's
Wait till
why.
you go through town meeting.
Right, but that's why staff had recommended to have these special meetings for Richmond.
no,
Anyways.
Could I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Second.
I can say.